Right, battery tenders, battery optimizers, whatever you want to call them. If you own a motorcycle and you're not riding it every day, especially if you're just a weekend rider, or if you have multiple motorcycles, which means it's difficult to ride all of them regularly, the battery on your bike needs to be maintained. Now, every time I make a video about battery optimizers, it usually provokes a handful of comments from people that just won't accept that a battery tender of some sort is a good idea, even a necessity, with anecdotal stories that their bike's 8 years old or 10 years old. The bike's laid up from the beginning of October until the beginning of May every year. They don't use an optimizer and it's still on the original battery, which is in perfect condition. Now, of course, it is just anecdotal. They don't offer any proof of that, nor can anyone else really disprove it. But the fact of life is, natural charge decay in any automotive battery is approximately 1% per day, especially in winter when it's cold. So do the maths yourself. Certainly by the 4-month mark, if your battery isn't fully discharged, it will be almost fully discharged. And it's also very likely that permanent damage will have been caused to that battery. You may be able to recharge it and bring some life back to it, but it will never have the same capacity again. Each year that you allow it to go through this cycle, the efficiency of that battery will diminish more and more. And generally speaking, 2 or 3 years is enough to kill a battery off completely. And although there are mitigating circumstances, I'm embarrassed to say I've fallen foul of that myself with the Bobber Black. Now, those of you who have been following this channel for a long time may recollect that my Bobber Black is actually an ex-Triumph press bike, used by Triumph for the initial promotion of the model when it was first introduced back in 2017. It then went into storage from the end of October 2017 until it was delivered to me in July 2018. And I'm pretty sure that during that time in storage, an optimizer wasn't used. I'll explain why in a minute. And this is when the initial cycle of damage was caused to the battery. I knew straight away that I was going to need an optimizer for this bike, even though I didn't realise the battery was already damaged. I didn't want to go over old ground because obviously I wanted to make a video on the subject. I'd already done the Optimates, and so I approached an American company called NOCO. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, it took them about 2 months to get back to me. And I got an email from a young lady in their marketing department. Now, contact with this young lady was like pulling teeth. I think we were exchanging emails for something like 2 months. But we hit a sticking point. Most of the YouTube videos that you see for NOCO are paid promotions. And I don't like doing paid promotions because it sort of ties your hands as to what information you're able to give out. Now, once I'd made this fact clear to the young lady concerned, she just sort of disappeared. She didn't turn me down, she just stopped replying. Although obviously it took me a while to realise that she'd stopped replying. I just thought maybe she was on holiday or off sick or, well, who knows. Now, some months later, middle-ish of last year I think it was, right out of the blue, I got an email from this young lady again saying that they did want to go ahead and offer me one of the units for a review. Again, it was like pulling teeth. It took weeks and weeks of email tennis. We got to the stage where she asked me which model I would like to review and also asked for delivery details, where to send it to. And in the final email, she asked me if I'd reviewed any optimizers or battery tenders before, to which obviously I replied yes. And I sort of get the impression that she didn't like the fact that I had actually done reviews for rival companies, because once again she just disappeared. And I think by that stage I'd done the Optimate obviously, but I think I'd just done the Deltran battery tender. Then I forgot all about it. We hit Christmas, then the pandemic came along, and then this spring I had a video to do with the Triumph Bonneville Bobber Black and discovered that the battery was dead as a doornail. Now, it was on taking the battery out that I realised the battery had previously been taken out of the bike because it wasn't fitted properly. Removing and reinstalling the battery on the bobber models is a bit of an education if you haven't done it before. And obviously, whoever had taken it out the last time, presumably to recharge it because it was flat, didn't know how to get it back in. And so they'd sort of bodged the refit. Now, I rigged it up to one of my optimizers, and it was on charge for 2 days, and although it had managed to get some charge into the battery, the optimizer was telling me that there was permanent damage and that I wasn't going to get it back to as new condition. And I think this will have been about a month, 6 weeks ago. I refitted the battery and I realised I was going to have to get an optimizer by hook or by crook for the bobber black, so I started surfing the net. First big shock is the Deltron charger. I think it was £30 when I bought one last year for the Interceptor 650, and the price had suddenly whooped up to £55 to £57 depending where you buy it from. Which I think, to be honest, for the specification of the unit, it's way overpriced. You can get an Optimate 4 for that price. Now, I was sort of deliberating whether to go for a NOCO. I didn't see the point in contacting the company again, I was busy with the channel, and then when it came to me doing the review of the Saturn V pipes for Moton Customs last week, guess what, the battery was flat again. Now, I simply didn't have time to attempt to recharge the battery, which probably wouldn't have been that successful anyway. Luckily, the local Halfords had a replacement battery in stock, so I nipped down there on the Interceptor, picked a new battery up, and while I was there, I bought myself a NOCO Genius 1, which was around the £35 mark, which I thought was acceptable. Now, the problem with the new Genius 1 is that it's the type that just plugs directly into a power outlet. And I have to say that NOCO don't give you an awful lot of cable with it. So I then had to go straight out and buy a 2-metre extension cable so that I could get the charger close enough to the bobber to be able to actually plug it in. Did have some problems with the ring terminals and actually accommodating them inside the rather limited space in the battery box for the bobber, but I just put that down to the silly design that Triumph have chosen for accommodating the battery on the bobber. Now, either way, I decided not to do a review of this particular charging unit, because I'm sure it would be okay if you can park your bike close to a power outlet, but not everyone has that facility, and I realised it was going to be fairly limited in its appeal to people. It's going to work for some, but it's not going to work for others. Now, to avoid any future issues, I realised that I was going to need an optimizer for the Bullet. I also wanted to give NOCO the benefit of the doubt. So I had a look on Amazon and I found the NOCO G1100. A very similar format to the likes of Optimate and the Deltron, but this is an outgoing model, so at the moment you can get it for under £30. It also theoretically has a far better spec than the NOCO Genius 1. Interestingly, it is able to charge and monitor most battery types that you will come in contact with, including lithium batteries, and it has a dual channel for both 6 and 12 volt batteries. Now, one really amazing feature that it does have that I haven't seen on other makes that I've tried is that it has a battery charge progress indicator on it. This is useful, especially when you're trying to rejuvenate a battery that has been discharged. They'll often take a couple or more days to recharge, and it's handy to be able to see what progress the charging has made on the battery. Because when they just have a charge light and that's it, you can see it's charging, but you don't really know whether the charger is getting anywhere. So it's really handy to be able to see the progress of the charge on the particular battery that you're working on. Once the battery has reached full charge, this charger will automatically just go into monitor and maintain mode, which theoretically, as long as your bike is plugged into one of these whenever it's not being ridden, will keep your bike battery in optimum condition for many years. Now, NOCO do claim that the actual charger casing is waterproof, although I couldn't find any RP ratings either on the box or in the instructions, so I'm presuming that it's just splash proof. Now, those are the positive points of this charger, and I'm afraid, certainly for me anyway, the cons started to outweigh the pros as the installation went on with this unit. I have a normal, average, one-car domestic garage. For health and safety reasons, especially when these things are permanently rigged up to bikes, it's not acceptable that you should have chargers and cables strewn across the floor. And to that end, I've always installed my battery optimizers on the roof beams out of harm's way and where they can't harm anyone else. When the bike's in use, I can just loop the cable around the unit to keep it safely out the way so no one's tripping over it and it doesn't become a hazard. I've never encountered any problems with the question of cables reaching motorcycles in any part of my garage using this method. It's obviously something that manufacturers of these devices usually take into account when they're designing them. Unfortunately, NOCO don't do that, because although the NOCO Genius 1 I considered to be a little on the short side, this one is even shorter. In fact, the only way I could make it reach the bullet, bearing in mind it was mounted directly above it, was to have more of the permanent wiring loom loose on the bike than I consider safe. I am going to have to buy an extension. Maybe that's why NOCO make them shorter than everyone else's. Now, the industry standard connector for battery chargers and optimizers is an SAE type connector, which means that they're all interchangeable. NOCO unfortunately have chosen to use their own proprietary connector, which will not be compatible with any other system. And a 3 metre extension is £15. Just to give you an idea, a third party SAE 3 metre cable extender is generally around about £5 or just under. Now, if you can get your bike very close to a wall or close to a power outlet, you're probably going to be able to get round this. But that's not always possible, and I suspect that's why NOCO have designed them in this way. They're going to get 2 bites of the cherry because a large proportion of customers are immediately going to have to come back and buy one of their extension cables shortly after buying the unit. I consider that to be manipulative. I don't like that. Now, the other thing I noted is that these connectors have a locking clip on them, which stops the connector from being accidentally pulled apart. There's absolutely no reason for that to be there. These are only going to be connected up while the bike's being parked up. It's not going to be connected up while you're riding it. And I consider that it is potentially dangerous. Now, I'll put my hand up and admit I've done it. There are occasions where I've started to move a bike out of the garage, but I've forgotten to disconnect it from the charger. With a standard SAE connector, that's no problem at all because it just pulls straight out, causing no harm. If they're locked together like this and you do that, you're either going to damage something on the bike or you're going to damage the charger. And in instances where these cables are strewn across the floor, because I know people are going to do that, it presents a far more dangerous trip hazard. The other thing that I didn't like, and it didn't register what the problem was initially. In fact, at first I thought it was a really clever idea until I thought about it. All other manufacturers supply 2 wiring harnesses with their optimizers. One with Crocodile Clips and one for permanent fixture to the bike so that when you get home you can just plug your charger straight in and walk away. Now, I know from watching video presentations that NOCO used to do that, but they've now changed things slightly. They just supply you with a Crocodile Clip lead. But this is a dual purpose harness, and what you can actually do is, by means of an Allen key, remove the two eyelets from the back of the Crocodile Clips and permanently attach them to the bike. Now the problem with this is that if you later on have a battery from another vehicle that needs attention and you need to use the Crocodile Clips to attempt to charge it or recover it, you've got to go through the inconvenience of removing this loom from your bike and reattaching the Crocodile Clips, which to say the least is inconvenient. Now it wouldn't have been so bad if it had had a standard SE connector on it, but it doesn't. So you're not even going to be able to utilise a Crocodile Clip setup from one of your other chargers. There's only one entity that this setup benefits, and again, that's NOCO. Now, coincidentally, before we get on to the final point, I did actually find that the little Allen screws on these Crocodile Clips were very poor quality. One of them, the hex in the actual Allen screw itself hadn't been formed properly, so I couldn't unfasten it with the correct sized Allen key, and I had to resort to a pair of pliers to remove it. Now, I should mention, in the interests of fairness to NOCO, the Genius one that I purchased, it does appear that they've used a far higher quality setup on that. I didn't have any problems with it, and it would appear that they've identified this issue with the older units and upgraded on the newer units. Right, so the last problem I encountered, and this relates to the ring tabs that you actually connect up to your battery for permanent installation on your bike. Now, this isn't going to be a problem for everyone, but it is worth consideration before deciding to purchase one of these units. Most manufacturers know that you've only got limited space inside a battery compartment on a motorcycle. And to that end, they tend to use a very compact, minimalist moulding on the actual ring connectors. These NOCO ones are particularly bulky. In fact, I reckon they're about 3 or 4 times the size of the normal ring connectors that you would get on an equivalent optimizer or battery tender. Now, if your connections to your battery are flat down from the top, as you would get with a UASA battery on the Triumphs, or even the battery on the Interceptor, you can get round this by fastening them down in a different direction and then banding the tabs down out of the way. It's not ideal, but you can get a satisfactory result. In instances like this X-side battery with the 90-degree connectors, it is a nightmare. It had me pulling my hair out, quite literally. I quite literally tried every permutation I could possibly think of to make this work. I was at it for about an hour, and there was no way that I could refit the terminal boots to keep them safe from water. The mouldings on these ring connectors are just too big, that's it. I even ended up cutting slits in the boots in an attempt to try and accommodate them, but there was absolutely no way I could make it work. Now, I managed to wedge the boots on eventually in a sort of a fashion. With the mouldings being so large, you can't thread them into the boot as you normally would, because they're just too bulky. I have ordered some replacements that have a wider opening on them in the hope that might work, but I have a feeling that I'm probably going to end up having to cut these ring connectors off and replacing them with conventional ring connectors, which obviously is going to wreck any stab you might have at a warranty claim if anything goes wrong with the charger in the end. Now, as you know, I don't generally do negative reviews. I wanted so much for this to be a pleasant, positive review, and believe me, I tried everything I could to make this work. Now, both of these chargers are sold as motorcycle and leisurecraft battery tenders, things like jet skis, that kind of thing, as well as cars. Now, the circumstances of some people are going to mean that this will work perfectly fine for you, But I suspect from my experience there are going to be an awful lot of people that may buy these and be bitterly disappointed with them. My honest opinion of these two NOCO chargers is that they've spent a lot of time and effort into making them look good. They've also put a fair amount of effort in creating a product that generates more revenue when certain customers find they don't work for them and they have to buy extension cables or whatever. But the real shame of this product is, in both cases, I don't think they've put enough thought into making it a good, dependable, all-round product that will work in most situations. It might just be me being sceptical, but I think they've put greed above customer satisfaction. Right, that's it for this video. Once again, thank you so much for watching both this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. If you have, please like and subscribe to the channel, and if you do subscribe, don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you can be informed whenever I upload a new video. I'm going to be back on Friday with the Motone Customs photo competition results, so we can see who this month's winners are. Until then, if you have to ride, please ride carefully, and I'll see you soon.